Happy Hanukkah, second night of Hanukkah. Let's light up the darkness. Who's in the house on a Thursday, second night of Hanukkah? Paul in the Great Northwest, Guy in Ohio, Nancy, North Carolina, Joe in the Inland Empire, Karen in Northern California, John in Maine, Bill from Poplar Bluff in southeastern Missouri, Stephen in New Hampshire, Lucy in Minnesota, Joseph in Englewood, New Jersey, Lorraine in Texas, Chaim in Florida, Ella, Shalom from Southern America. I'm assuming that's not South America. Spencer in Connecticut, Marjorie in Georgia, Aoife in Florida. Welcome, everybody. And Sharon in New Jersey. Tonight's episode of AT Daily is sponsored by Michael Zemmel in loving memory of his father, Shaul ben Avraham. Michael, may the neshama have a great aliyah. May your father's neshama be lifted even a little higher in the merit of the learning that we do today. And may you and all your loved ones be showered in blessings. We say amen. And thank you for enabling us to share more Torah with more people around the world. Isn't this tractate great? Every night. Fascinating concepts here in Tractate Sanhedrin, 24th volume of the Talmud, continuing our discussion of Mishna number 1 here in chapter 1. Our daf is page 8 here in Tractate Sanhedrin, and we're picking it up right at the top of page 8a. The Gemara continues to interpret clauses from the verse that was cited above, right? This is sort of teaching or instructing judges how they are to judge. So the verse said in the Torah, Devarim or Deuteronomy 1:17, you shall hear the small and the great alike. So Reish Lakish says this teaches that the judgment of one peruta, which is like a penny, should be as dear to you as the judgment of 100 manet, which is 10,000 dinars, an astronomical sum, meaning that the judge has to take a small matter as seriously as a large matter, since in either case, he is tasked with examining and judging and communicating Torah law, God's judgment to these litigants. It really doesn't matter what the amount is from the perspective of what his duty is as a judge. And the Gemara asks, with regard to what law is this said? If we say it is with regard to the need to study it carefully and to decide the case justly, it is obvious that even cases relating to small sums must be judged thoroughly. Rather, Reish Lakish was speaking with regard to giving it precedence. The small claims case may not be deferred in favor of the larger claim merely because the disputed sum is smaller. There's a queue, a line of cases coming through the door at the Beis Din, and you can't just, skip the line with your rich litigants who have a bigger case to try. They're going to have to wait their turn. Now, the Gemara continues the interpretation of the verse, you shall not be afraid before any man, for the judgment is God's. So Rabbi Hanan says, do not suppress your statement of opinion due to any person. Since the verse continues, for the judgment is God's. Rabbi Chama, the son of Rabbi Hanina, says, the Holy One, blessed be he, says, it is not enough for the wicked judges that they take money from this person and they give it to that person unlawfully, but they even trouble me. This is God talking. They even trouble me to return the money to its rightful owners, as proper justice is ultimately in the hands of God. So if a corrupt or incompetent judge transfers money wrongly from one litigant to another because his judgment was improper, then it's troubling God to undo that judge's error. Very interesting way of looking at it. Now, the verse continues. This was Moses talking. And the cause that is too hard for you, you shall bring to me, and I will hear it. So Rabbi Hanina, and some say Rabbi Yoshia, says, On account of this matter, which displayed a degree of presumptuousness on the part of Moses, Moses was punished, as it is stated, and Moses brought their cause before the Lord. Numbers 27:5. So this is referring to the daughters of Zelophehad, who were daughters of one man who died of his own sin in the wilderness, and there were no brothers. So normally women don't inherit, men inherit. Sons have an obligation to care for their sisters, but just according to Torah law, sons inherit and daughters don't. But, as we've seen before, where there are no sons, the daughters do inherit. Now, that law was not clear at the time of the first women to inherit, these daughters of Zelophehad, after the Torah was given. And what they were particularly interested in wasn't money. What they were interested in is that their family should have a portion of land in Israel, a portion of land in the promised land. And so they were pushy about it, and they were rewarded for that. What it's saying here is that when Moses said, listen, you guys, I'm appointing you as judges, and if you have a matter that's too difficult for you, bring it to me and I'll judge it. And so now one opinion is saying that Moses was sounding a little arrogant when he said that. He should have said, and if it's too difficult for you, bring it to me and I'll bring it to God, which is what ended up happening when this case of the daughters of Zelophehad came to him. He didn't know what the answer was, so he had to check with God. And Moses brought it before the Lord because he did not know the answer. But Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak objects to this critique of Moses. Is it written that Moses said, and I will tell you, which would indicate that Moses assumed the authority for himself? No, that's not what's written in the Torah. It is written, and I will hear it. Right? If the case is too difficult for you, bring it to me and I will hear it. That doesn't mean that Moses assumed that he would be able to solve it. He said, I will hear it. And if I have learned the law, I have learned it. And if not, I will go and learn it. Consequently, there was no presumptuousness on Moses' statement. Rather, the unusual manner in which the law of women's inheritance was revealed, right, that it wasn't just given in the Torah, God only gave it after the daughters of Zelophehad petitioned to receive some inheritance, and Moses said, that sounds like a good claim, let me take it to God, and God said, they have spoken correctly, and they will inherit, and this is how women will inherit. So the unusual manner in which the law of women's inheritance was revealed may be understood as it is taught in a Baraisa. It would have been fitting for the Torah portion about inheritances to have been written by attributing it to Moses, our teacher, i.e. to introduce this law with the standard formulation of, and the Lord spoke to Moses, saying. But that's not how it was introduced. Rather, the daughters of Zelophehad achieved merit as a result of their initiative in pursuing a portion of land in the land of Israel, and therefore the halacha was written by attributing it to them. And similarly, it would have been fitting for the Torah portion concerning the punishment of the wood gatherer, the one who gathered on Shabbos and received a very stiff penalty for that. It would have been fitting for that law to have been written by attributing it to Moses, our teacher. But rather, the wood gatherer was found guilty, and the law was written by attributing it to him. And this serves to teach you that guilt is engendered by means of the guilty and merit by means of the innocent. A little bit reminiscent of a teaching we've had elsewhere, that heaven will assist you in whatever you are pursuing. If you are pursuing to better yourself, to acquire more merit, to learn more Torah, to be a more righteous and upright person, heaven will assist you in that desire. And if it is your desire to give into your lusts and bodily desires and greeds, heaven will assist you in that too. In other words, you're just going to condemn yourself and lose your portion in the next world, and you'll get assisted in that endeavor as well. So we really have to strive to have, even if we can't always conduct ourselves as we would like to, because we're weak, because we have an evil impulse, an evil inclination, and we have bodily needs and desires, and we often give in to that. But our striving should be to be more upright, holy, righteous, kind individuals. And if that is our desire and what we strive for, heaven will assist us in that. Now the Gemara continues to interpret verses pertaining to judges and to judgment. So it is written in Deuteronomy 1:16, and I charged your judges at that time. And it is written soon thereafter, and I commanded you at that time all the things that you should do, in Deuteronomy 1:18. So there is an apparent contradiction between these verses, as one indicates that God commanded the judges, and the other indicates that he, meaning God, commanded the people directly. So Rabbi Elazar says that Rabbi Simlai says Moses issued a warning to the community that the awe of the judge must be upon them. And Moses issued a warning to the judge that he must bear the burden of the community. So up to what degree must the judge bear this burden? And Rabbi Hanan, and some say Rabbi Shabtai, says it is as Moses said, that he carried Israel as a nursing father carries the sucking child. That's Numbers 11:12, right? That this relationship between the children of Israel and God, one of the ways in which that relationship is expressed and manifest in the world is in the relationship between the children of Israel and their judges. They must have awe of the judges, because the judges are the ones who are, exercising the administration of God's law in the world. So you have to have respect for them, akin to your respect for God. Obviously, it's not the same. We love God with all our heart and all our soul. But if God has caused judges to be appointed to administrate God's law, then we have to have that kind of awe of those judges. And likewise, those judges have to have awe of God and love of God. And therefore, since they've been appointed to administrate God's law for the benefit of the children of Israel, they have to take that responsibility so seriously, with as much, personal care and attention as a father would display for his vulnerable baby child. Similarly, a distinction is drawn between two verses where Moses commanded Joshua concerning his impending leadership, right? As when Moses retired, as it were, when he was taken from the people and died, and he was replaced by Joshua, he sort of charged Joshua what kind of a leader he needs to be. It is written that Moses said to Joshua, "For you shall go with these people into the land," at Deuteronomy 31:7. And it is written at Deuteronomy 31:23, "For you shall bring the children of Israel into the land," right? You shall go with these people into the land in the first verse, and you shall bring the children of Israel into the land. So is these people the children of Israel, or does it mean something else? So Rabbi Yochanan reconciled the difference between these two charges and said, Moses said to Joshua in the first verse, "You and the elders of the generation will enter into the land of Israel together with the people," i.e., the elders will assist you in the leadership. But subsequently in the second verse, the Holy One, blessed be He, said to Joshua, "You yourself must bring the people. Take a rod and strike the people upon their skulls. There must be one clear and authoritative leader for the generation, and there may not be two or more leaders for the generation. You will have deputies and lieutenants and people to help you carry out the leadership, but the buck stops with you," is what God was saying to Joshua. Now, back to the subject we started before this set of digressions. Now, the Gemara returns to the discussion of halachic matters related to our Mishnah, Mishnah number 1, here in chapter 1. The sages taught in a baraisa, a zimun is to be issued with three people. And the Gemara analyzes, well, what is meant by the term zimun in the baraisa? If we say it is referring to the invitation to recite grace after meals jointly, right, that when 3 or more men have eaten together, when they recite the grace after meals, there's an added part at the beginning, the kind of invitation to say the grace. that we only recite when there's 3 or more men who have eaten together. Otherwise, we just go right into the grace and we don't do this introduction. And so that's normally called the zimun, or the zimun blessing. So here they're saying, well, when you just use the word zimun by itself, does it always mean that, the introduction to the Birkat Hamazon, that we say the grace after meals? A zimun is to be issued with 3 people, and the Gemara analyzes what is meant by the term zimun in this baraisa. If we say it is referring to the invitation to recite the grace after meals, which is called the zimun bracha, the zimun blessing, well, this raises a difficulty. But isn't it taught in baraisa that zimun and the zimun bracha are to be issued with 3 people? So zimun and zimun bracha are mentioned separately. It must mean that there's the zimun bracha, which is the introduction to the grace after meals, and there's the zimun, which is apparently referring to something different. So zimun and zimun bracha are to be issued with 3 people. And as the baraisa lists these laws separately, it indicates that the term zimun by itself is referring to a different matter. And if you would say that the baraisa explains itself by clarifying what is meant by the term zimun, it is the zimun bracha. Well, another source indicates even more clearly that these terms are referring to different procedures. Because isn't it taught in another baraisa that zimun is performed with 3 people and the zimun bracha is performed with 3 people? So evidently, therefore, zimun by itself is not referring to the zimun bracha. So rather, what is the zimun? It is a summons to appear in court for judgment. Right? An invitation, we say the invitation to say the Birkat Hamazon, it's like a summons, right? And so this is the same word that's used for a summons to come to court. And the Gemara notes that this is similar to that which Rava said. With regard to this court of 3 judges who are sitting and waiting to adjudicate a case, and the agent of the court went and said to one of the litigants that he is summoned in the name of only one of the 3 judges, well, that summons is insufficient. It is as if the agent did not say anything at all, unless he made his summons to the court in the name of all 3 judges. That is what is meant when it is taught that zimun is issued by 3. And the Gemara clarifies that statement applies only when it is not the day set for judgment, not on the day that the court is meeting that very day. On the day of judgment, when it is understood that a summons in the name of only one judge actually indicates a summons from the assembled court, since they're all meeting together on that day, we have no problem with a summons in the name of only one of the judges. But if that summons is issued before the court has met, before the court is in session, then it is inadequate and will only carry weight to that witness or litigant to come to court if it is said in the name of all 3 judges. New subject. The Mishna, our Mishnah, number 1 here in chapter 1, teaches cases involving payment of double the principal. This happens when a thief steals and then he's caught and he has to pay double what he stole. So cases involving payment of double the principal must be adjudicated by a court of 3 judges. Rav Nachman bar Rav Chisda sent an inquiry to Rav Nachman bar Yaakov. Let our teacher instruct us with regard to cases involving laws of fines, right? The double payment of the principal in the case of a thief, restoring the principal, that's restoring the principal. Doubling that amount, right? That the second payment of the amount of the principal, that's understood to be a fine. Right? And fines and penalties, same thing, in the Torah require expert judges to apply them properly. So let our teacher instruct us with regard to cases involving laws of fines. By how many judges must such cases be adjudicated? And the Gemara asks, what is the dilemma that he is raising? Didn't we learn in the Mishnah that such cases are judged by 3 judges? So rather, Rav Nachman bar Rav Chisda is raising a dilemma with regard to a single expert judge. May he adjudicate cases involving laws of fines by himself or not? So Rav Nachman bar Yaakov said to him, you already learned this in the Mishnah, cases involving payment of the double the principal and payment of 4 or 5 times the principal. In the case of a thief who stole a sheep or a cow, and then either slaughtered it or sold it, he now owes the value of the cow plus, right? He has to make a fourfold payment or a fivefold payment in the case of an ox for the value of what he stole. Very big penalty, right? Or very big fine. So, and these require 3 judges. 3 judges. And what is meant by 3? If we say it means 3 non-ordained lay judges, well, didn't your father's father say in the name of Rob that even if there are 10 judges, if they are lay judges, they are unfit for adjudicating cases involving the laws of fines? Rather, the Mishna is discussing expert judges, and it says that 3 are necessary. Therefore, a single expert judge may not adjudicate such cases, presumably even if the litigants submit to his authority. But if it's a case involving fines, then no. Then they need 3 expert judges. Now, the Mishnah records a dispute concerning the number of judges required to judge the case of a defamer. This is somebody who is, gets married, decides he doesn't like his bride, and he wants to get out of the marriage, so he accuses her of not being a virgin when she comes, that he discovers that on his wedding night. And so presumably she committed adultery during the period of their betrothal before they became fully married. Now, if indeed it's proven that she committed adultery, then that would be a death penalty case. If it's not proven that she committed adultery, but it is established that she wasn't a virgin on her wedding night, when this is her first marriage, then that would be grounds to, cancel the marriage. And it would obviously be incredibly harmful to her reputation and the reputation of her family. So it's a very, very serious charge. But there's two there's 2 ways this could go. Either as a death penalty offense for committing adultery, or as a financial penalty case for being a defamer, or for if indeed it's true. But if the guy's a liar, he just wants to get out of the marriage and he's accusing her, well, then he's going to suffer some real consequences. He's going to owe money to the girl's father, and if she wants to be married to him, he will never, for the rest of his life, have the ability to divorce her. That's something only she will have the right to do, which is very unusual in Jewish law. So what is going on here with the defamer? Now, the Mishnah records a dispute concerning the number of judges required to judge the case of the defamer. And by the way, we find that law in Deuteronomy 22, verses 13 through 19. And this generally involves a man defaming his wife by falsely accusing her of having committed adultery while she was betrothed. So Rabbi Meir says the case must be tried by 3 judges. And the rabbis say, meaning the majority who overrule Rabbi Meir, they say that an accused defamer is judged by a court of 23 judges. It is obvious that in a case in which the husband's accusation has the potential to result in the woman's execution, that Rabbi Meir would agree that as this is a case of capital law, it must be tried by 23 judges. Therefore, the dispute in the Mishnah must involve a lesser claim, such as a case where there are no witnesses to the alleged adultery, so the death penalty is off the table, but the husband claims she was not a virgin when they married, and he is suing for monetary compensation because he, maybe gave a dowry payment, or made, whatever. He, as a contractual matter, thought that he was marrying a virgin, and she's not a virgin, so he's actually suing her father for damages. And so then it is a financial case, and presumably it could be judged by 3 judges. Now the Gemara asks, but although the law of a defamer contains the potential to qualify as a case of capital law, what of it? As long as in this particular case there is no such potential, because there were no witnesses to this alleged adultery, so there can't be a death penalty, then why do the rabbis require 23 judges? Ula said that Rabbi Meir and the rabbis disagree with regard to the question of whether one needs to be concerned with the possibility of rumors. Meaning that if the husband raises the claim that his wife committed adultery, although he has no witnesses and there is no potential for a capital conviction, should the court be concerned with the possibility that the publicity generated by such a case may lead to the emergence of witnesses, which would turn it into a capital case? Rabbi Meir holds that one need not be concerned with the possibility of rumors, and therefore you can begin this case with 3 judges. And apparently the rabbis who overrule Rabbi Meir hold that one does need to be concerned that these rumors might lead to witnesses emerging who will testify that she did indeed commit adultery, and it'll turn into a death penalty case. And therefore, this case needs to have 23 judges from the outset. Rava says everyone agrees that one need not be concerned with the possibility of rumors. And here what they disagree about is whether one need to be concerned about the honor of the first judges. What does this mean? And with what are we dealing here? We are dealing, for example, with a case where a court of 23 judges was convened to judge a case of capital law because the husband accused his wife of committing adultery. As there were no witnesses to the alleged adultery, the court of 23 judges was disbanded. No witnesses, no possibility of a death penalty case, no possibility of proving that adultery happened. Therefore, we don't need 23 judges. So they disband the court. And then the husband said to them, okay, well, at least adjudicate for me the aspect of monetary law to reduce the sum in her marriage contract to the amount for a non-virgin. At that point, it became strictly a case of monetary law, which would normally be tried by 3 judges. Nevertheless, the rabbis hold that the court of 23 judges must be reconvened out of concern for their honor, since they had already begun to hear the case. In other words, a court sat to hear this case of adultery. Turned out, well, there's no witnesses for adultery, so they disbanded the court. The husband says, okay, but then at least establish for me that she's a non-virgin, and that, whatever I agreed to in the ketubah, the marriage contract, which was based on the idea that she's a virgin, it should be rewritten that she wasn't a virgin. And so if we get divorced or I die, my estate or I owe her the smaller payment that will be owed to a non-virgin, as opposed to what I initially agreed to. Since it's the same case, right, the same husband, the same wife, etc., if you now pull together a court of 3 to hear this monetary dispute, people out there might hear that, well, there was a court, it was disbanded before giving a verdict, and then they convened another court. So this would suggest that there was something wrong with the judges of the first court. Now, we know they disbanded the first court because that was a court of 23 judges, which was brought together for a capital case, and it turns out there's no capital case there. And then they pulled together another court just to hear a monetary case. But people, out there might hear, yeah, well, there was a court. It was disbanded without giving a verdict, and then they brought together another court. Must be that the judges of that first court were somehow inadequate, right? They heard wrong, but it still might impinge on the honor of those judges in the first court. So are we concerned about this? So it seems like the rabbis, the majority, are concerned for the honor of the judges of the first that were first convened, and Rabbi Meir is not concerned for the honor of those judges. Now we're on page 8b, and the Gemara raises an objection to this analysis from a baraisa, and the rabbis say, if he took her to court and claimed money, the case is to be adjudicated by 3 judges. But if he took her to court and claimed that she was liable to receive the death penalty, the case must be judged by 23 judges. Now, granted, according to Rava, the baraisa can be read as referring to the terms of the beginning of the trial. If he claimed money at the outset, the case must be judged by 3 judges. Since the case concerns a financial claim, 3 are sufficient. But if he initially claimed that she should be subject to the death penalty, even if the case becomes transformed into a financial case, it must still be judged by 23 judges out of concern for their honor, according to Rava. But according to Ula, who says the requirement of 23 judges is based on the concern about rumors, right, that witnesses might emerge once this case begins, then it is difficult. Rava said, I and the lion of the group both explain this. Right? So Rav is saying, okay, he's talking about himself. That's the I. Who is the lion of the group? And the Gemara asks, who is the lion of the group? It is Rav Chia bar Avin. It doesn't get explained here, but in a note, it says that Rava, in a few places in the Talmud, refers to his student, Rav Chia bar Avin, as the lion of the group, meaning his premier student. Right? So when Rav is talking about his students and he refers to the lion of the group, he's talking about Rav Chia bar Avin because he was the star pupil. So he invites him, to give his opinion when Rav is giving his opinion. So he and Rav explain. With what are we dealing here? We are dealing with a case where the husband brought witnesses to testify that the wife committed adultery. And the wife's father brought witnesses. And through the testimony of the wife's father's witnesses, it became clear that the husband's witnesses are conspiring witnesses. Right? The husband brought witnesses that his wife committed adultery. Her father brought witnesses who showed that these witnesses who claim that they saw this man's daughter commit adultery, they're liars because they were actually in another place at that time. Right? So remember, this is conspiring witnesses. Conspiring witnesses are established when other witnesses come and say, well, this testimony that they're giving, it's obviously a lie because at the time and place where they claim to have witnessed this thing, they weren't there. We saw them at another place at that time. And so now the court establishes them as conspiring witnesses, and conspiring witnesses are subject to the same punishment that the defendant would have received if the testimony had been established, had been held up. So here, this husband, who's a real wicked person, who's bringing false witnesses to establish that his wife committed adultery, for which she'll be subject to the death penalty. And now the girl's father proves that they are false witnesses. So then what happens? So the husband brought witnesses to testify that his wife committed adultery. And her father brought witnesses who classified the husband's witnesses as conspiring witnesses. So in that case, if the father comes to collect monetary restitution from the husband for defaming his daughter, the case may be adjudicated by 3 judges, since what the father is looking for is monetary compensation. But in a case of capital punishment, such as the trial of the husband's witnesses, they're not on trial right now. They're going to come back and be tried. That will be a capital case because if their testimony had been upheld in the first case, the girl would have been subject to capital punishment. So now the conspiring witnesses are subject to capital punishment. And in that case has to be heard by 23 judges. Abaye said the dispute between Rabbi Meir and the rabbis can be understood in a totally different way. According to everyone, one need be concerned for rumors. Right? In other words, if you've got a case that's a capital case because she's accused of adultery, then even though the husband's not bringing witnesses, we are concerned that since he's accusing her of adultery, that such witnesses may emerge. And therefore, since she's accused of adultery, you need 23 judges because adultery is a capital crime. And so we are concerned for rumors. And we are also concerned for the honor of the first judges. That we would disband that court and then reconvene with a court of 3 might dishonor the first group of judges. We are all concerned about those things. But with regard to the dispute between Rabbi Meir and the rabbis, here we are dealing with a case where the witnesses to the adultery warned her that adultery is a capital transgression, but they did not specify which kind of capital punishment she would be liable to receive. And now we get to something we've talked about many times. When is capital punishment possible? Okay, whether it's death penalty or lashes, when is it actually possible for a court to issue that verdict? Very limited circumstances, and here we're now going to give it. And the matter is in accordance with this Tana, whose statement is as follows. As it is taught in a Baraisa, With regard to all the others, those who are liable for the various death penalties stated in the Torah, other than the inciter to idol worship. Okay, so that has its own particular circumstances. Somebody who incites others to commit avodah zarah, to commit idolatry, his death penalty has its own rules. So other than that, every other kind of death penalty, okay, murder, theft, adultery, idolatry, not inciting others to commit idolatry, but you yourself committing idolatry, all the different death penalties. When can a court actually issue the verdict of a death penalty? The court can only execute when the following elements are present. The congregation, meaning when the case is brought to court. And, so it's in court, right? It can't be done outside of court. And there are witnesses, right? There have to be 2 witnesses who are qualified witnesses. And forewarning, right? If this woman committed adultery and they saw her commit adultery, and they come and testify that they saw her commit adultery, she's still not going to get the death penalty unless the witnesses said to her at the time that she was going to commit the adultery, right before she did it, they said to her, if you commit adultery, you will be subject to the death penalty. And then she committed the adultery anyway. That's forewarning. Is that enough? Perhaps not, because there seems to be one additional element where they would need to say to her, if you commit adultery, you will be subject to the death penalty, and it will be the death penalty of. I'm not sure which it is for adultery because there are 4 kinds of death penalties that are specified in the Torah. Hanging, burning, stoning, and there's one other that escapes me right now. But there's 4 kinds of death penalty. And do they have to say you're liable to the death penalty if you commit this crime, and the particular death penalty that you would receive is or not? Do they have to give her the specific kind of death penalty or not for the forewarning to be effective? Let's read on. So with regard to all these others, those who are liable for the death penalties stated in the court, in the Torah, the court will execute them only when these elements are present. The congregation, meaning it's the case is brought to court and there are witnesses, and forewarning was given just before the defendant committed the transgression. And the court does not execute him unless the witnesses had informed the defendant that he is liable to receive the death penalty from the court. Okay, got it. The death penalty from the court. But does the witness have to inform them of the particular kind of death penalty? Rabbi Yehuda says the defendant is not executed unless the witnesses had informed the defendant by which form of the death penalty he is to be killed. Sounds like that's a minority opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, but the majority, it's enough if the witnesses says, if you do that, you're liable to the death penalty in court. But they don't have to say which death penalty. So according to the opinion of Abaye, the dispute in the Mishna involves a case in which it is known that the witnesses forewarned the woman, but they did not specify the specific death penalty that she would be liable to receive. In this case, in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Meir holds that there can be no death penalty, and therefore the case may be tried by 3 judges as a monetary case, but the death penalty is off the table. Rav Papa said a similar explanation. Here we are dealing with a woman who is a chaveira. Now here's an interesting term that we haven't seen. A chaver, we've seen with respect to tithing and various other matters. A chaver, the word means friend, but it means specifically in the context of Jewish law, in the Talmud, somebody who is learned in Jewish law. Right? So a chaver, if you buy produce from a chaver, then you know it's been tithed properly, right? And in fact, chaverim, like their standard is even much higher, that they would only eat something if it's in a state of tahara, of ritual purity, which is something that normally is only a requirement for priests or something that's being brought into the holy temple. But there were people who just were more machmir, they were more stringent with themselves. Basically, we're talking about Torah scholars, and they would, hold themselves to a higher standard, and they wouldn't, even though it wasn't a requirement for them, they would only eat food that was in a state of ritual purity, and of course, tithed properly. Those are the chaverim, and it refers to men who are, generally speaking, Torah scholars. Now we have this term chaveira. So that means a woman who is very knowledgeable in Torah matters. Right? Oh, decapitation was the fourth one that I think hanging is strangulation, so decapitation was the other death penalty. Thank you, Sharon. And Sharon is a chaveira, right? So a chaveira is a woman who is very learned in Torah law. So what they're asking here is, well, if she's learned in Torah law, does she have to be warned that this particular crime that she's about to commit would result in the death penalty? Or now that we know that she's learned in Torah law, maybe she doesn't need such a warning? That's the question being asked. So Rav Papa said, here we are dealing with a woman who is a chaveira. She is knowledgeable with regard to Torah matters. And they disagree with regard to the issue that is the subject of the dispute between Rabbi Yosef Bar Yehuda and the rabbis. As it is taught in a Baraisa, Rabbi Yosef Bar Yehuda says, a chaver, right, as he is knowledgeable in Torah, does not need to be issued a forewarning by the witnesses, because forewarning is given only to distinguish between unintentional sin and intentional sin. And in the case of a chaver, it is clear that he is aware of the law. So the rabbis maintain that even a chaver may not be punished unless he has been forewarned. At least according to that view. Rav Papa suggests that Rabbi Meir holds that a chaveira must be forewarned, and the Mishna discusses a case where this forewarning did not take place, and consequently the trial of her alleged defamer could not lead to capital punishment because that aspect of capital cases was missing. I'm almost done. Questions or comments, please get them in now. Rav Ashi says a different explanation. The dispute in the Mishnah concerns a case where the witnesses warned her that she would be liable to receive lashes. Not the death penalty, but still corporal punishment, right? Bodily punishment. Lashes from a whip. So they didn't warn her that she'd be subject to the death penalty, which she would be subject to if they warned her that, but they only warned her that she'd be subject to lashes. In that case, the court would try her for adultery, and if they found her guilty, she would receive lashes and not the death penalty. And what they disagree about, we're at the top of 9a now, and they disagree with regard to the issue that is the subject of the dispute between Rabbi Yishmael and the rabbis, as we learned in the Mishnah. One who is accused of violating a prohibition that would render him liable to receive lashes must be judged by 3 judges. In the name of Rabbi Yishmael, it was stated, cases involving lashes must be adjudicated by 23 judges. Might not be a death penalty, but it is bodily punishment, and so according to Rabbi Yishmael, that requires 23 judges. Therefore, Rabbi Meir holds that the case of the defamer may be adjudicated by 3 judges because he holds that a court of 3 may administer lashes. The dissenting opinion, which holds that lashes may be administered only by 23 judges, also holds that this case must be adjudicated by a court of 23. That's where we'll stop and take a few questions. Yosef, from what I remember in another tractate, the quality of trustworthiness of these witnesses are considered towards the outcome, as we discussed yesterday, the judges as well. So that's interesting. What you're saying is, even though there are 2 witnesses, and they testify, and there's no other witnesses that are come forward and establish them as conspiring witnesses, as liars, nevertheless, if these 2 witnesses are not, don't have a sterling reputation in the community, the judges might take that into account. Certainly sounds reasonable. Bill, if the husband brings in conspiring witnesses to testify against his new wife, is he a conspiring witness and therefore subject to the same punishment? Great question. I feel like he should be because he caused this to happen. However, proving that would be another matter, right? I think you'd have to prove in the trial of the conspiring witnesses that the husband was part of the conspiracy. You'd have to prove that. And it might not be so easy to prove. If the conspiring witnesses are the ones who testify, yeah, he hired us to do that. The problem then is they're conspiring witnesses. They've already been established as conspiring, or they're about to be established as conspiring witnesses, so we don't believe what they say. So to prove that the husband is part of the conspiracy, we need more evidence. Maybe it can be done, maybe not. But, it would have to be proven. It wouldn't be just by definition, since he brought false witnesses in his case against her for adultery, that he would automatically be part of the conspiracy and subject to the same punishment. Morally, we certainly feel that he should be. But perhaps, somebody else or the conspiring witnesses themselves who just hate the woman, brought this and said to the husband, yeah, we saw her commit adultery. And then the husband brought the case to court. And then it turned out that they were liars. But they lied to the husband as well. So it's certainly not automatic that the husband is part of the conspiracy, and that's why it would have to be proven. And finally, Yosef, this may sound like an obvious question, but what constitutes witnessing adultery? Is it the actual qualified act or the husband warning not to be secluded? Right, and we've talked about this before. Well, first of all, the husband warning not to be secluded that's its own matter, right? Now we're talking about the sota, right? If she was warned not to be secluded with a man, and then she secluded herself with that man, and witnesses saw that, we have not established adultery. We've only established that she secluded herself with a man that the husband warned her not to seclude herself with. That's why she then can go down to, when the temple is standing, to Jerusalem and drink the bitter waters, because she's the suspected adulteress, and the bitter waters could prove her innocence. But there's no death penalty involved in terms of the witnesses and a court-ordered death penalty. The bitter waters is that's from heaven. If she's innocent, it's just water and dirt. It's not going to kill her. If she really did commit adultery, it'll kill her because heaven is carrying out that sentence. But when we're talking about a court actually ordering a death penalty for this woman, that would be because the two witnesses saw her commit the adultery. Literally, right? They would have to literally have seen the act. So this is a crazy set of circumstances. Like, how could this ever happen? That witnesses say to her, if you have sex with that man, you will be liable to court-imposed death penalty. And then she goes and has sex with that man in front of these witnesses. I mean, it seems like a pretty unusual thing to have happen. That's not the normal, episode of Cheaters on TV. But, this is to show you that, and this is why they said that a court that actually imposes the death penalty more than once in 70 years, or even once in 70 years, is considered a murderous court, right? Like, courts just basically almost never actually issued a death penalty. It would have to be the sort of thing where, they're really afraid that if they don't execute this person's going to cause other people to die. Right? And, it's just so unusual because the requirements for imposing a death penalty are so difficult as to almost never be met. That's what I've got for us today. And with God's help, we'll be together again tomorrow, Friday, at the regular winter Friday time of 11:30 a.m. Pacific. Have a great night and a freilichen Hanukkah.